All right, Shalom. First and foremost, I would like to give all praise and glory unto Yahweh, Bahashem, Yahweh Shai, Bahashem, Rakakwadash. Double honors unto the apostles and the elders of GMS who rule well, teach well, being great examples for his younger brothers. And peace and blessings and salutation to the hopeful that out there pushing his word and truth and in sincerity across the four winds in the name of Yahweh, Bahashem, Yahweh Shai, Bahashem, Dash, pushing to get up out of here. Shalom to the hopeful elect, the believers, the listeners whom have came back to the obedience of the scriptures through faith in Yahweh Bashem Al Shai. All right, and what I want to go into is a lesson going into depart from me. Okay, because you had this Jake, came to the camp this past weekend, and he was under the impression, that there was a hell, and he was all over the place on them Jakes that thought that thought he knew everything, was coming up as if he was sincere asking questions, but he was really, trying to, stump doctrine, because you can tell that he's been listening to different camps. He has a feel for the camps, so he came up like he was sincere, but you know how Jake do, think they know every goddamn thing and ask these questions, which is supposed to stump us. But we went into it, but I want to go into it a little more when you go into the book of Matthew chapter 7 and 21. All right. Now when you read it, says not everyone, it's Matthew 7 and 21, says not everyone that saith unto me, Lord, Lord, shall enter into the kingdom of heaven, but he that doeth the will of my Father which is in heaven. Okay, because you have a lot of false teachers. There's a lot of men that can verbalize the name of Yahweh Bashem Al Shai. Okay, they can acknowledge the name, all right, but their doctrine is off. Okay, their intent is off. Okay, a lot of these guys are sold out. Okay, so there's gonna be a lot of men, that can verbalize the name, but they ain't right. Okay, and we're seeing it more and more in these latter days as the Lord is causing judgment already to happen on these men that ain't right. Okay, they can verbalize the name, but they don't really acknowledge them name. They don't really, believe in those names. They don't, because coming in their name is coming back to a conduct and the expectation. You see, just being able to verbalize a name doesn't put you in the clear. No, being able to verbalize a name and knowing the name, okay, is the first step. Okay, but then there's a conduct and the expectation. There's a discipline. There's a commitment. Okay, that goes along with that name. Okay, verse 22 says, "Many will say to me in that day, Lord, Lord, we have prophesied in thy name, and in thy name have we cast out devils, and in thy name done many wondrous works." Okay, because these men, they've been teaching. They say things that are edifying. They make points. Okay, they can put you, in the vicinity, okay, of salvation. Certain men that have left these camps and come to, GMS. And even if you don't come to GMS, man, but you separate from these false camps and really come into the truth and the understanding, you know, because these men are able to edify to some degree, so they're able to get demons off people by teaching them the truth, okay, because this world infests you with demons. This truth and this understanding removes demons, so these guys come with these partial truths. They do, at least, to some extent, some of their congregation, is able to begin to be healed from this world. Okay, and Lord will, we know there's an elect amongst these other groups that are going to continue to come into the true understanding. It's going to fully come in. Okay, but these guys think because they get, this praise, they get this money, they done made themselves a celebrity on YouTube, from the ministry, that they think that they're in the clear. They think that they're in good standards, man. Okay, but the Lord has them deceived. They're delusional. Okay, it says, and then will I profess unto them, I never knew you. Depart from me, ye that work iniquity. Now, Jake read this in camp, and he was saying depart as if that meant the Lord was sending them to hell. Okay, which we'll touch on. We got plenty videos going into hell, but the Spirit might have us to go into that as well. on another lesson of Aratazar. But let's deal with this, and then will I profess unto them, I never knew you. Yeah, because you guys that aren't in the right spirit, you know, the Lord is not going to know you in that time. You're not going to come under the banner of the protection of Yahweh Shai in the time of judgment. Okay, you're going to be left out there to deal with the wrath of the Lord. Okay, he says, depart from me, ye that work iniquity. Now, when you go into this word depart, okay, so let's go into this word depart. As you go into this root word here, apple, okay, apa, or apple.
Strong's G 575. Apa.
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 Okay, it says a separation of a part from a whole. Okay, a separation from a part from a whole, of any kind of separation of one thing from another, by which the union of friendship of the two is destroyed. A state of separation that is of distance. You see? So when Yahweh Shah says, depart from me, because there's a separation of the 1/3 and the 2/3. And there's a lot of people that know that they're Israelites, that they're part of the 2/3. And in the time of judgment, the Lord's going to make that separation. That's going to be the Lord saying, depart from me, because it's going to be a separation. Okay? And you Israelites that ain't right, okay, you're going to get lumped up in the category with the 2/3. The Lord's going to make a separation. Okay? He's going to end the union. You see, and leave you to be destroyed. Okay, that's why even when you go here to this account, when you go to 2 Kings chapter 2 verse 9, and this was when Elijah was getting ready to get beamed up in the chariot, and Elisha was there. Okay, so this is their last, dialogue before Elijah is, all right, taken in the chariot. 2 Kings 2:9, it says, and it came to pass when they were gone over that Elijah said unto Elisha, ask what I shall do for thee before I be taken away from thee. Then Elisha said, I pray thee, let a double portion of thy spirit be upon me. And he said, thou hast asked a hard thing. Nevertheless, if thou see me when I am taken from thee, it shall be so unto you. Yeah, it should be so unto thee. But if not, it shall not be so. And it came to pass as they still went on and talked, there appeared therefore a chariot, you see that, of fire, and horses of fire. Okay, so this is a chariot. This is a group of chariots. Okay, and Elijah's going to get take away one of these chariots. Okay, the lights on the chariot is being described as fire. Okay, and then the horses are just multiple chariots. Okay, around his main chariot. You see, looking like a horse. It looked like a group of horses carrying a chariot. This is how they're describing it, but it's multiple chariots. Okay, and one chariot that was a little bigger than the rest. Okay, and it says imparted them both asunder. Wait a minute. And parted them both asunder, and Elijah went up by a whirlwind into heaven. Okay, so it said it parted them both asunder. So that beam that came out the chariot, it separated Elijah from Elisha. Okay, and in these last days, those beams from those chariots is going to deliver the elect. It's going to separate 1/3 from the 2/3. 2/3 is going to be left, all right, to get their destruction. And that's going to be how Shai saying, depart from me. Now, we know Elisha is part of the elect, but just giving an example of, the separation that the chariot made by beaming up Elijah. Okay, and that's how it's going to be for the 1/3 and 2/3 in the last days. You read in verse 11, as they was walking along and talking, suddenly a chariot of fire appeared, drawn by horses of fire. It drove between the two men, separated them. Okay, and Elijah was carried by a whirlwind into heaven. Okay, so this depart from me, it's going to be the Lord separating the 1/3 from the 2/3 by the deliverance Yahweh Shai is coming with. Okay. And these jakes that ain't right and know that they're Israelites, they're gonna be lumped up with the 2/3. It's gonna be how Shah saying, "Depart from me, nigga." Okay, that's why when you go here to Zechariah, let's go Zechariah 13. Okay, Zechariah 13:8. And it shall come to pass that in all the land, said the Lord, two parts therein shall be cut off and die. That's 2/3. All right, they cut off. You see, that's separation. When you cut something, what you separate it. But the third shall be left therein, which they're going to survive. Okay, it says, and I will bring the third part through the fire. Okay, so when you go here, I want to get this word cut. Okay, that's what I want to get before I go on. Shall cut off. All right, and the Hebrew word is karat. All right, karath. Okay, in the Hebrew, karath. All right, and it says to cut off, to cut down. Okay, it says to cut out, to eliminate, to kill. You see, all right, the word karath. You see, to cut off body part. All right, now it says there's one definition I wanted. It says to cut off, to destroy, to cut down, to destroy, to permit to perish, to allow someone to perish or be destroyed. Okay? So you niggas that ain't right, that know you Israelites, and you nigga women that know you Israelites, that ain't right, the Lord's gonna tell you to depart from him. He's gonna cut you away to be destroyed. Okay? He's gonna permit you to be, all right, caught up in this destruction. Okay? That's that depart from me, you workers of iniquity, man. You see, and it says, verse 9, it says, I will bring the third part through the fire, okay, which is the Lord's anger, and will refine them as silver is refined, and will try them as gold, and they shall call on my name, and I will hear them, and I will say, it is my people, and they shall say, the Lord Yahweh Bashem Al Shai is my power. Okay, so there's a remnant that the Lord, all right, is going to accept. Okay, he's going to bring them up in their chariot. That's the Lord accepting his remnant, accepting his bride. Okay, but then there's 2/3 are going to be rejected. Okay, and they're going to be permitted to deal with this judgment. Okay, the Lord's going to permit them to have to deal with this judgment. They're going to be cut off to be destroyed. Okay, they're not going up on no chariots, man. Okay, that's the Lord saying, depart from me, you workers of iniquity. I never knew you, man. All right, because you were BSing, man. You were never sincere. You see, the Most High gonna lump you niggas to 2/3, okay, and let them missiles hit your ass, man. You know, so that's the point. Just want to go into that, Lord will, you brothers. All right, Ed, you feel so edified. Till next time, I say Shalom. Kwam Yashala, Abba soon. Shalom.